Welcome to MOWTalks. A few days ago, I was ready to do another one of these, and as I began doing it, I just began weeping. I said, Lord, I can't do this one. And over the past couple days, have just been challenging myself. I said, Lord, what is this? And I remember something that Bob Jones said a long time ago to me. He said, son, don't take nothing personal. But I have to take some things personal. Because, see, in my own life, I realized that I have my own set of failures. I have my own set of things where I know I need to grow up a whole lot and I need to learn a lot. And I'm not all that God has called me to be yet. But what happened, and the reason I couldn't do it was because I had a dream. And it was a dream that was kind of still. There wasn't a lot happening in it. There was not conversation. But I saw a man. I saw a very thin man. In fact, his flesh seemed to just be hanging off of him. He was a bald man. And he was sitting in a chair. And as I looked around, I realized that the room was gray, drab walls, and I looked behind him and I saw bars like on a prison window. And it hit me, and nothing was happening. As I looked at this man, I said, Lord, what is this? He said, it's you. I said, it's me? I said, Lord, this man looks malnourished. This man looks sentenced to death. He looks imprisoned. I said, this is me? And I woke up. And the shock of seeing that, I went, Lord, where am I? Where am I with you? You know, what appears on the outside, and anybody who knows me, that I don't appear like a scrawny person. Most people know that I don't sound like I'm in prison. And so I began asking the harder questions, the questions that have to be asked, but nevertheless the questions that God is wanting to push us through to. I was reading in Jeremiah how Jeremiah said, I remember the passion, the devotion of your youth. I remember what it was like. The Lord is speaking through Jeremiah, and he's saying, I remember when my people really loved me. Revelation would say something similar. It says, you've forgotten your first love. Come back to your first love. There was something about that in both Old and New Testament. Have you forgotten where you came from? A couple of verses later in Jeremiah, he says, you know, you cared about things. And in fact, when you did things that weren't good, you felt guilt. Wow. But you see, here in our 21st century, we push people past that. Oh, you should never feel guilt, and there's nothing that you've ever done wrong. You're okay. You know, God's grace has completely covered it all, which is true. His grace does cover. But I recognize so much that pressing into the grace of Jesus doesn't mean that we come up short. It doesn't mean that we are allowed to just simply become malnourished in the things of the Spirit and look like you're sentenced to death. That something has to happen inside our spirits where we grow and we learn and we become vibrant in health. And we're not imprisoned, where we are completely free, not just externally by behavior, but internally. Because when heaven looks at us, does it see somebody vibrant and vital? Does it find somebody who's hanging out with the supernatural in a way? And I'm talking about the angels and heaven in such a way that you are becoming robust in your faith and in your walk with God. That this is what's normal, to be with Him. Not to be siphoned off of anything we've ever had. A number of years ago, the Lord gave me a vision, and it was one of the most powerful visions I can remember. It's impacted my life many times. It's brought me back to the reality of who it is that I'm following and why some things are they're just worth it. You just have to go through things because they're worth it, because He is worthy of it. Not because it's worth it to me, but because it's worth it to Him. And in this dream, I was in front of a house, and it was a huge house, massive house. And I remember looking inside the house, and I remember there were all these toys, very much like in our world, all the electronics and stuff that we have. And we had all these toys. In the driveway, there was a Maserati and a Lamborghini and a Porsche and a number of other cars. Everything looked extremely wealthy. The yard was well manicured. It was just an amazing, amazing house. But it had this loomy effect, like overshadowing everything. And I said, Lord, what's this? He said, if you want this house, you can have it. I said, I can? He said, yes. But it's not really the house I want for you. I said, what house do you want for me? And he took me down the road, and we walked down the road, and it didn't seem that far, but it was down the road a little bit. And I remember I came upon this house that was crystal. It was glass. It was unbelievable, the whole thing. And in fact, there was nothing in it except the glory of God shining out. It emanated His presence. I said, Lord, I want this house. And He said, Danny, this is the house I want for you. But for you to have this house, there's a house that you need to take right now. I felt like I was playing, let's make a deal. You want this house? Pick door number 2, door number 3. But I felt like the Lord was saying, I'm giving you a choice. And one of the things I've learned about life is that life is filled with choices. We all have choices. We have choices to allow the Holy Spirit to lead us. We have choices to not let Him lead us. We make those choices moment by moment. When we hear the nuance of the Father, when He speaks to us, we can listen or we can turn the other way. And those choices are not huge choices. They're daily choices. They're hourly. They're by the minute. They're choices that we have to make all the time. And if you want to cultivate a relationship with God, you have to cultivate this relationship repeatedly, 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 repeatedly. It's not religious. He says that those who are led by the Spirit of God have the right to be called the sons of God. People are like, well, I'm one of the sons of God. It's like, are you being led? Are you being led all the time? Because only when you're led by the Spirit of God do you have the justification, the authority, the right, according to Romans, to be called the sons of God. It is only while we are being led that we are the sons of God. Just as it is only when the kingdom is ruling in our lives that we are in the kingdom. Those aren't geographical places. Those are entry points. Those are places we can live in or not live in. And so, in this story, as we leave the first house, I begin realizing we're coming up to this big field, and he turns off onto the field, and it's a little path, like a footpath, and in the midst of grass, and we keep going, and we keep going, and this one seems far. This one seems like it's not right at the road, and we're walking, and the grass is getting longer and longer and longer, and eventually the grass is over my head, and I'm just walking down this thin little path, and we come up to this huge wrought iron gate, this big old iron gate, and he says, the house I have for you is in here. And I remember going and opening that gate, and I looked and I saw this field that was covered with rubble. It was like a house had been cleared, or a big old factory had been cleared. And when they clear that, there's leftover little rubble, like little rocks, and it was nothing nice. It wasn't like a beach. It was rocky. It was but flat. And I said, Lord, where's the house? And he pointed over in one direction to some newspapers that happened to be laying on the one end. And he said, That's your bed. And on the one end of the bed was a rock. He said, that's your pillow. And I looked and I was like, Lord? And he said, there's 4 books on the bed. Go read them, know them well, make them your manuals for life. And I went over to the bed and I saw these 4 books. The first one was Suffering and Hardship. What? That was the name of the book. Suffering and Hardship. The second one was Persecution. The third one was Death. And the fourth one was Abundant Life. And he was still standing by the gate and he said, those are your manuals for life. Know them well. And then as I opened my eyes, I could see beyond the property, towards the back of the property, there was a little stone fence that went across the property. And beyond that, there were fields and fields as far as I could see. And in that stone fence, there's a little gate. And on those fields, I could see people for as far as I could see in every direction. And they were all making their way to that gate. I said, Lord, what's this? And he said, Danny, if you'll take this house, all of them will know me. And that was the end. And I realized that God was placing me in this horrible place of having to make choices. And there's some who've gone on and they've made choices and now they're figuring out, man, I made a choice that, yeah, I got everything that this world offers, but I got nothing of what the kingdom offers. I look like that man in that prison. There's others who've made choices and then they stop making the choices towards the Lord. And then there's others who just thought, well, it doesn't really matter anyways. God will just take care of it all. And God has placed vision over my life, but nevertheless, I don't need to do everything. God's just going to do that. And we believe that the visions of God are just they're a shoo-in. They're just automatic. God's going to do that because He once gave me a prophetic word or once showed me something. And I have to tell you, that's not true. When Paul was given a vision in the book of Acts where God says, I've called you as an apostle to the nations, to the Gentiles, Paul had some serious choices to make. He made a choice to leave Jerusalem and go to Antioch. He made a choice for 17 years to learn and how to become someone who could actually be tooled by the Lord in order to effectively reach the Gentiles. He learned that his life was not his own. He learned sacrifice. He learned all those things. And in that meeting in Acts chapter 13, where it says, set apart Paul and Barnabas for the work I've called them to, he was ready instantly to go, and they did. There was an instantaneous, I'm going to drop everything and come. I can move now. I don't need anything. And he went. And the interesting thing about the Apostle Paul is that he never stopped going. He just kept going. He went until he lost his head. He went until the very end. He kept going even when he was sentenced to death. He was moving towards something that God wanted to do on the earth. He saw the purposes of God as more vibrant and vital than his own, more important than his comfort. He wasn't comfortable hanging on to a log in the midst of the ocean. He wasn't comfortable getting bitten by a snake. He wasn't comfortable getting whipped with those lashes. He wasn't comfortable being persecuted and rejected. He wasn't comfortable because comfort was not the option. The option was following God. I want to bring you back to where I began. In Jeremiah, God calls Jeremiah. He says, listen, it's not going to be an easy walk, son. But I want you to know you're going to overcome. He's so clear. You're going to overcome. And I want to just tell you today that Whatever God's called you to do, you're going to overcome. I've been with pastors in the past few weeks who've lost friends and loved ones for the sake of the gospel. I've been with those who are in the most dangerous of dangerous places for the sake of the gospel. I want so much for the American church to begin to understand that what we're doing, it is so placid. It is unbelievable. We have the best worship. We have the best music. We have the best buildings. We have the most freedom we've ever had. But most of us are complaining and whining about the stupidest things because we think it's so difficult for us. But I want you to understand that what God has called us to is a journey that's going to carry us into all four of those books. You will have suffering and hardship. I promise you, I prophesy it over you. You will have persecution. I prophesy that over you. There will be death that you will experience in your life. But you'll have abundant life. And I prophesy that over you too. You know, I'm not prophesying anything different than what Jesus did. Jesus said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you too. He said, they're going to come, they're going to string you up. There are things that are going to happen, and you need to know that. You need to prepare yourself for that, and you need to live in a way as if it really matters, that what we're doing really matters, because it does. Who you are and who you carry is the most important thing on this earth for your life. Having the comforts, having all the niceties, it doesn't matter. And at the end of it, guess what happens? You get that house. You get that house filled with His glory. And for some of us, we at first when I received that, I thought, oh, this is future. This is coming in glory. And I believe that. I believe it is coming in glory. But I also believe that there's a house of glory that we get to live in the midst of this. That's why Paul could say we were moving from glory to glory, that he was living in a house of glory, and he continued receiving glory even in the midst of all his persecution. That persecution does not negate the presence of God. That difficulty does not negate the presence and the glory of God all over your life. That what God has for you is for you to walk in His glory. So today, walk in the glory of God, but fulfill all that God has called you to do. Get out of that chair. Get out of that chair in that prison. Come out of your prison and say, I want to walk with God today. I want to be closer to Him than I've ever been. I don't want to be the church that says, you know, they're pitiful, blind, poor, they're naked. I don't want to be that guy. I want to fall in love with my first love. I want to fall in love with Jesus again. He is amazing. And so I pull you into that today. In Jesus' name, Father, I ask for the release of the Spirit of God, Lord, over every person watching this, that there will be a breakthrough in their life. A breakthrough in their life, Lord, not to get out of things, but Father, to get into you. We bless you. You have an awesome day.